The crack of gunfire echoed through the downtown Seattle streets as Detective Marcus Chen pressed his back against the cold brick wall of the federal building, his radio crackling with panicked voices. "Sniper on the roof, northwest corner, we've got multiple casualties," he barked into his mic, sweat beading on his forehead despite the October chill. Behind him, the SWAT team huddled in formation, their tactical gear gleaming under the emergency floodlights that had transformed the business district into a war zone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. "Where's the shooter?" shouted Captain Rodriguez, his voice barely audible over the wailing sirens and helicopter rotors churning overhead. The elite marksmen had been scanning rooftops for 20 minutes, their high-powered scopes searching every window, every ledge, every possible vantage point. 3 shots had been fired, 3 people wounded, and still no one could pinpoint the sniper's location. That's when Elena Vasquez stepped forward from the crowd of first responders, her paramedic uniform marking her as civilian support, not tactical personnel. At 34, she moved with quiet confidence despite her modest 5'4" frame, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun that revealed the determined set of her jaw. She had been tending to the wounded when the 4th shot rang out, closer this time, the bullet striking a concrete barrier just feet from where she knelt beside an injured businessman. "Ma'am, you need to stay back," Detective Chen warned, his hand instinctively moving to guide her away from the danger zone. But Elena's brown eyes weren't focused on him or the chaos around them. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, listening to something only she could hear in the urban symphony of sirens, shouts, and helicopter noise. "The shot came from the Morrison Building," she said with startling certainty, pointing to a glass structure 3 blocks east. 14th floor, corner office facing the plaza. The acoustic signature suggests a suppressed rifle, probably a 308 based on the muzzle report. Detective Chen stared at her in disbelief. The Morrison Building hadn't even been on their radar. Every trained sniper and spotter in the tactical unit had been focused on the taller structures with direct line of sight to the shooting scene. "How could you possibly know that?" he asked, his voice mixing skepticism with desperate hope. Elena met his gaze steadily. "Because I've been listening to sniper fire for longer than most of your team has been alive." The statement hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon, creating a moment of stunned silence among the hardened law enforcement professionals surrounding them. Detective Chen's radio crackled again with reports of another possible sighting, this time from a rooftop 6 blocks south, but Elena shook her head almost imperceptibly. The confusion and misdirection were exactly what a skilled sniper would want, she knew, having been on both sides of this deadly game more times than she cared to remember. 20 minutes earlier, Elena had been finishing her shift at Harborview Medical Center when the first emergency call came through. Multiple shooting victims in the downtown corridor. All first responders requested to converge on the federal building plaza. She had grabbed her medical kit and joined the ambulance crew, expecting to treat the usual urban trauma cases that filled her days as a paramedic in one of Seattle's busiest emergency response units. Her transition to civilian life had been deliberate and complete. After 8 years in the Army, the last 4 as a reconnaissance specialist with the 75th Ranger Regiment, Elena had chosen medicine as her path forward. The skills that had once helped her locate enemy positions in hostile territory now served to save lives in a different kind of battlefield. Her colleagues at the hospital knew her as a competent, unflappable professional who could handle the most chaotic emergency situations with calm efficiency. What they didn't know was that her composure under pressure had been forged in places where the wrong decision meant death for herself and her team. Elena's military service had ended 3 years ago when an IED explosion in Afghanistan left her with a traumatic brain injury that, while fully healed, had convinced her that it was time to find a new mission. The army doctors had cleared her for continued service, but Elena had made her choice. She wanted to build something instead of destroy, to heal instead of harm, to create a life that her younger sister Maria could be proud of when she came home from school each day. The apartment they shared in the Wallingford neighborhood was modest but comfortable, filled with medical textbooks and Elena's collection of acoustic equipment. Music had become her hobby, her way of processing the memories and emotions that sometimes surfaced in quiet moments. She had developed an almost supernatural ability to distinguish between different sounds, to identify sources and distances with remarkable precision. Her neighbors sometimes heard her practicing guitar late into the night, the gentle melodies a stark contrast to the harsh realities she had once faced in combat zones. But on this October afternoon, as she knelt beside the first shooting victim, Elena's military training had instantly reasserted itself. The businessman, a middle-aged executive named David Park, had been struck in the shoulder by what appeared to be a high-velocity round. As Elena worked to control the bleeding and stabilize him for transport, her mind automatically cataloged the details that others might miss. The angle of entry, the wound pattern, the sound signature of the initial shot that she had heard even from inside the ambulance. "Stay with me, David," she murmured as she applied pressure to the wound, her voice carrying the calm authority that had once guided soldiers through combat situations. The bullet missed the major arteries. "You're going to be fine." David's eyes, wide with shock and pain, focused on her face as she worked. There was something about her presence that transcended her role as a paramedic, a quality that made people trust her instinctively, even in their darkest moments. The second victim had been a young mother pushing a stroller through the plaza. The bullet had grazed her leg, and while the injury wasn't life-threatening, the woman's terror for her infant daughter had created a scene of emotional chaos that Elena had to navigate while providing medical care. "Your baby is safe," Elena had assured her, her hand steady as she bandaged the wound. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The stroller blocked any debris, and she's completely unharmed. You did everything right by shielding her. As more paramedics arrived and took over patient care, Elena found herself in the unusual position of being both a first responder and an inadvertent witness to what was clearly a coordinated attack. The third victim, a security guard who had been trying to direct pedestrians to safety, had been shot in the chest. Elena had worked frantically to keep him stable during the critical minutes before the trauma team arrived, her training taking over as she managed his airway and monitored his vital signs. It was during those intense moments of medical intervention that Elena's auditory processing abilities had been unconsciously cataloging every sound in the environment. The helicopter patterns above, the echo signatures of police sirens bouncing off different building surfaces, the acoustic properties of various structures in the downtown area. When the fourth shot had fired, her mind had instantly triangulated the source based on the subtle variations in sound that reached her ears. Detective Chen was still staring at her, his expression a mixture of skepticism and desperation. Around them, the tactical team continued their systematic search of the more obvious sniper positions, their movements precise but increasingly frantic as precious minutes ticked away. Elena could see the frustration building in their faces. The professional anxiety that came from knowing a skilled shooter was still out there, still capable of taking more lives. "Look, I appreciate your willingness to help," Chen said finally, his tone attempting diplomacy while clearly dismissing her input. "But we have trained professionals handling this situation. The best thing you can do right now is focus on the FISA medical response and let us handle the tactical aspects." Elena nodded once, understanding the detective's position, while recognizing the futility of trying to explain her qualifications in the middle of an active crisis. She had learned, during her years of civilian life, that her military background often made people uncomfortable when it surfaced unexpectedly. It was easier to be Elena the paramedic, Elena the neighbor, Elena the big sister who helped with homework and made breakfast on Saturday mornings. But as she returned to checking on her patients, Elena couldn't shake the certainty that the tactical team was looking in the wrong direction. The Morrison Building's acoustic signature was unmistakable to someone who had spent years learning to identify threats by sound alone. In the mountains of Afghanistan, that skill had meant the difference between life and death for her reconnaissance team. The ability to pinpoint enemy locations based on the subtle variations in weapon reports, the way sound traveled through different types of terrain, the acoustic fingerprints that different firearms left in the environment. Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through her thoughts as he addressed the assembled team. We've got reports of possible muzzle flashes from 3 different locations. Team Alpha, take the West Side Tower. Team Beta, focus on the Columbia Center. Team Gamma, sweep the municipal building. Elena listened to the deployment orders and felt a familiar knot of anxiety in her stomach. They were spreading their resources across multiple targets, exactly what a skilled sniper would want them to do. The tactical teams moved out with professional efficiency, their equipment and training evident in every movement. Elena watched them disappear into the urban landscape, knowing that each minute of misdirection gave the shooter more time to plan additional attacks or make an escape. She glanced toward the Morrison Building, its glass facade reflecting the emergency lights like a mirror, and made a decision that would change everything. Rather than voicing her concerns again to Detective Chen, Elena quietly approached one of the younger officers who had been coordinating communications. Officer Jessica Martinez was someone Elena had encountered before during joint training exercises between the medical and police departments. They had developed a professional rapport that went beyond the typical paramedic law enforcement relationship. "Jessica," Elena said quietly, pulling the officer aside. "I need you to listen to me for a moment. I know this is going to sound strange, but I think the sniper is in the Morrison Building, not the locations your teams are searching." Officer Martinez looked around nervously, aware that contradicting the tactical deployment could be career-ending if she was wrong. "Elena, I know you're good at your job, but this isn't really your area of expertise. The captain has experience with these situations." "I have experience too," Elena replied, her voice carrying a weight that made Martinez pause. "More than you might think. I need someone to at least check the Morrison Building while the teams are focused elsewhere. If I'm wrong, nothing is lost. If I'm right, lives could be saved." The urgency in Elena's voice was compelling, but Officer Martinez found herself in the difficult position of choosing between following established chain of command and trusting the instincts of someone she respected, but whose qualifications for tactical assessment were unclear. Elena could see the internal struggle playing out in the young officer's expression. "What makes you so sure about the Morrison Building?" Martinez asked finally. Elena glanced around to ensure they weren't being overheard, then leaned closer. The acoustic signature of the shots, the way the sound bounced off the surrounding structures. The Morrison Building has the right elevation and angle for the shots that were fired. More importantly, it's being ignored by everyone else, which is exactly what a smart shooter would want. Before Martinez could respond, the radio crackled with another urgent transmission. "Shots fired, shots fired. We have an officer down near the municipal building." The transmission sparked immediate chaos as resources were diverted to the new crisis, exactly as Elena had feared would happen. In the confusion that followed, Elena made a decision that would have been unthinkable to her 3 years ago. She quietly slipped away from the main response area, moving through the crowd of first responders and civilians with the practiced invisibility that had once been essential to her survival. Her destination was clear, the Morrison Building, where she was certain the real threat was waiting. The skill set that had lain dormant for 3 years began to reassert itself as Elena navigated the urban terrain. Her movements became more deliberate. Her awareness heightened to the point where she could track multiple conversations while monitoring the sounds of the ongoing tactical response. The civilian Elena, the one who went to work each day and lived a quiet life with her sister, seemed to fade into the background as someone else took control. Moving through the downtown streets during an active shooter situation required careful timing and route selection. Elena used her knowledge of the area, gained through years of responding to medical emergencies throughout Seattle, to find paths that kept her away from the main police cordons while still allowing her to approach the Morrison Building. She moved with purpose, but without haste, understanding that drawing attention to herself would only complicate an already dangerous situation. As she got closer to the Morrison Building, Elena's senses became even more acute. The acoustic environment changed as she moved between different structures, each building creating its own signature in the urban soundscape. She could hear radio chatter from multiple law enforcement agencies, the distant sounds of the tactical teams searching the wrong locations, and underneath it all, the subtle indicators that told her she was moving in the right direction. Morrison Building was a 20-story glass and steel structure that housed various corporate offices and a few retail establishments on the ground floor. Elena's assessment of the 14th floor had been based on the acoustic properties of the shots she had heard, but as she approached the building, she began to notice other details that supported her theory. The parking garage beneath the building provided multiple escape routes. The surrounding structures offered good concealment for positioning, and the elevation provided clear sight lines to the Federal Building Plaza where the shootings had occurred. Elena's approach to the building was methodical and careful. She knew that if she was right about the sniper's location, she could be walking into an extremely dangerous situation. Her military training had taught her to assess threats and plan multiple contingencies, but it had also taught her that sometimes action was necessary, even when the risks were high. The ground floor of the Morrison Building was largely deserted, most of the occupants having been evacuated when the shooting began. Elena moved through the lobby with quiet confidence, her paramedic uniform and ID badge providing her with the credibility she needed to access the building without raising suspicions. The security guard who remained at his post was more than happy to cooperate with someone who appeared to be part of the official response. "Have you seen anyone suspicious go up to the upper floors?" Elena asked, her tone professional but not alarming. The guard, a middle-aged man whose nervousness was evident in his voice, shook his head. "Most everyone cleared out when the shooting started. Haven't seen anyone go up in the last hour except for maintenance, and that was before all this started." Elena nodded, filing away the information while continuing to assess the building's layout. The elevator bank was clearly visible from the security desk, but she noticed a stairwell access that was partially concealed behind a decorative column. A skilled operative would have chosen the stairs, avoiding the elevator's electronic tracking, and maintaining multiple escape routes. "I need to check the upper floors for any injured people who might have been missed during the evacuation," Elena told the guard, her explanation reasonable enough to avoid suspicion while giving her access to the building's upper levels. The guard looked uncertain but ultimately nodded. The chaos outside had created an environment where normal protocols were suspended in favor of emergency response priorities. Elena's medical credentials and professional demeanor gave her the authority she needed to proceed. As Elena made her way toward the stairwell, she felt the familiar sensation of heightened awareness that had once been her constant companion in hostile territory. Every sound, every visual detail, every subtle change in the environment registered in her consciousness. She was no longer Elena the paramedic going about her daily routine. She was Elena the reconnaissance specialist moving through potentially dangerous territory with a specific mission objective. The stairwell was dimly lit and echoing with the sounds of the ongoing emergency response outside. Elena climbed steadily, her breathing controlled and her movement silent. She counted floors. As she ascended, her mind calculating angles and distances based on her assessment of the shooting locations. The 14th floor remained her target, but she was prepared to adjust her search based on any new information she encountered. As she reached the 10th floor, Elena paused to listen. The sounds of the tactical response were more muted here, filtered through the building's structure and the urban environment below. But there was something else, a subtle quality to the acoustics that suggested recent activity on the floors above. It was the kind of detail that would have been meaningless to most people, but Elena's trained senses recognized it as significant. The climb to the 14th floor took on new urgency, but Elena maintained her disciplined pace. Moving too quickly could create noise that would alert a potential threat, while moving too slowly might allow a dangerous situation to develop. She had learned during her years in the army that timing was often the difference between success and failure in tactical situations. When Elena reached the 14th floor, she paused at the stairwell door to listen and assess. The corridor beyond was quiet, but there was a quality to the silence that suggested recent occupancy. She could hear the distant sounds of the ongoing emergency response, but there was also something else, a subtle indication that someone was present on this floor. Elena's hand moved instinctively to her radio, then stopped. Calling for backup would create complications that could escalate the situation unnecessarily. If she was wrong about the sniper's location, she would be exposing herself to professional embarrassment and potential disciplinary action. If she was right, but handled the situation incorrectly, she could make a dangerous situation even worse. Instead, Elena made the decision to proceed with reconnaissance, using her training to assess the situation before taking any irreversible action. She opened the stairwell door slowly, listening for any sounds that might indicate immediate danger. The corridor beyond was empty, with office doors lining both sides of the hallway. Most of the doors were closed, but Elena could see that several of the offices had windows facing the direction of the Federal Building Plaza. Moving through the corridor required all of Elena's skills in silent movement and threat assessment. Each office potentially contained a dangerous opponent, but Elena's training had taught her to distinguish between genuine threats and false positives. The acoustic environment of the building, combined with her analysis of the shooting pattern, continued to guide her toward the corner office that she had identified as the most likely sniper position. As Elena approached the corner office, she could hear something that made her blood run cold. It was the sound of a rifle being assembled, the distinctive metallic clicks and slides that she had heard countless times during her military service. Someone was preparing for another attack, and Elena was potentially the only person in position to prevent it. The door to the corner office was slightly ajar, providing Elena with a limited view of the interior. She could see part of a desk, a portion of the window that faced the plaza, and the edge of what appeared to be a rifle case. The sounds of weapon preparation continued, methodical and professional, suggesting that the shooter was experienced and comfortable with their equipment. Elena's mind raced through her options. She could retreat and call for backup, but that would take time that might not be available if the shooter was preparing for another attack. She could attempt to confront the shooter directly, but that would put her in extreme danger against an unknown opponent. Or she could try to gather more information about the threat before deciding on a course of action. The decision was made for her when the sounds of weapon preparation stopped, replaced by the subtle movements of someone taking position at the window. Elena knew that she was running out of time, that whatever action she was going to take needed to happen immediately. The recognition of the acoustic signature that had brought her to this moment was about to be tested in the most dangerous way possible. Elena's training took over completely as she prepared to face a situation that would determine not only her own fate, but potentially the lives of everyone in the plaza below. The quiet paramedic who had built a peaceful life in Seattle was about to confront the reality that some skills, once learned, never truly fade away. The sound of a rifle being positioned at the window told her that the next few minutes would test every aspect of her training and judgment. The corner office of the Morrison Building was about to become the stage for a confrontation that would prove whether Elena's acoustic analysis had been correct, and whether her years of civilian life had dulled the edge that had once made her one of the Army's most effective reconnaissance specialists. The sounds that had guided her to this moment were about to be joined by new ones, and Elena knew that the outcome would determine whether her instincts had led her to save lives or into mortal danger. Elena pressed herself against the wall beside the corner office door, her heart beating with the controlled rhythm that had been drilled into her during countless high-stress training scenarios. Through the narrow gap, she could see more of the room's interior now. A figure in dark clothing was positioned at the window, a precision rifle mounted on a bipod and aimed toward the plaza below. The shooter's movements were methodical and professional, suggesting military or specialized law enforcement training. The tactical situation was far more complex than Elena had initially assessed. The sniper wasn't just randomly targeting civilians. From her vantage point, she could see that the rifle was aimed specifically at the command post that had been established near the federal building. The next shots would likely target the senior law enforcement officials coordinating the response, creating chaos that would allow for either escape or escalation to a larger attack. Elena's mind processed the implications with the speed that had once made her invaluable in combat zones. This wasn't a lone gunman acting out of desperation or mental illness. The positioning, the timing, the systematic targeting all suggested a coordinated operation with specific objectives. The earlier shots had been designed to create confusion and draw resources away from the real target, which was now becoming clear. She could hear radio chatter from the ongoing tactical response, voices reporting negative contacts at the municipal building, and continuing search operations at the other target locations. Meanwhile, the real threat was preparing to eliminate the command structure of the response effort. Elena realized that she might be the only person in position to prevent what could become a massacre of law enforcement personnel. The weight of the situation settled on her shoulders with familiar heaviness. During her years with the Rangers, Elena had been in similar positions where individual action could determine the outcome of much larger operations. The difference now was that she was operating entirely outside any official authority, relying solely on her own judgment and skills in a situation where making the wrong choice could have catastrophic consequences. Elena began to move closer to the door, using techniques she hadn't employed in 3 years, but that came back to her with startling clarity. Her breathing slowed and deepened. Her awareness expanded to encompass every sound and movement in the environment, and her body moved with the fluid precision that had once made her nearly invisible in hostile territory. As she positioned herself to get a better view of the office interior, Elena could see more details about the shooter and the setup. The rifle was a high-end precision weapon, likely chambered in .308 Winchester based on the size and configuration. The shooter was wearing tactical clothing that suggested professional training, and the positioning and equipment indicated someone with extensive experience in long-range engagements. More concerning was what Elena could see of the shooter's preparation. There were multiple loaded magazines arranged within easy reach, and what appeared to be a communication device that could be coordinating with other operatives. The systematic nature of the setup suggested that this was not an isolated incident, but part of a larger plan that was still unfolding. The confrontation reached its climax when Elena managed to gain decisive control over the weapon while simultaneously neutralizing the shooter's ability to continue resistance. Her techniques were precise and effective, designed to end the threat without causing unnecessary harm. The years of civilian life had not diminished her capabilities when they were truly needed. With the immediate threat neutralized, Elena found herself in control of a situation that was far more complex than it had initially appeared. The shooter, now restrained and disarmed, was clearly a professional operative whose capture would likely yield important intelligence about the broader operation. But Elena was also aware that she had acted entirely outside official channels, creating potential complications for both herself and the ongoing investigation. Elena's first action, after securing the situation, was to check the rifle and ensure that it could not be used to continue the attack. She found that the weapon was indeed loaded and ready to fire, confirming her assessment that she had prevented what could have been a devastating attack on the law enforcement command structure below. The precision of the setup and the quality of the equipment indicated that the planned shots would likely have been fatal. The communication device that Elena had observed earlier was still active, and she could hear voices indicating that other elements of the operation were still in progress. The realization that this was part of a larger coordinated attack added urgency to the need to contact the tactical teams and redirect their efforts. Elena was no longer dealing with just an isolated sniper, but with what appeared to be a multi-part operation. Elena used the shooter's communication device to listen to the ongoing coordination between what appeared to be multiple operatives. The conversations were brief and coded, but Elena's intelligence training allowed her to extract enough information to understand that the sniper attack had been designed as a diversion for a larger operation targeting a different location entirely. The implications of what Elena was hearing were staggering. While the tactical teams had been focused on finding the sniper, other operatives had been positioning themselves for what appeared to be a much larger attack on a secondary target. The sniper in the Morrison Building had been sacrificed as a distraction, with the real objective being something that the law enforcement response had left unprotected. Elena realized that she needed to contact the tactical command immediately to alert them to the broader threat. But she also understood that her presence in the Morrison Building and her confrontation with the sniper would require extensive explanation. She had prevented one attack but potentially uncovered evidence of a much larger conspiracy. Using her radio, Elena contacted Detective Chen with information that would change the entire nature of the law enforcement response. "Detective Chen, this is Elena Vasquez. I'm in the Morrison Building, 14th floor, corner office. I have the sniper in custody, but there's a much bigger problem. This was a diversion operation." The response from Detective Chen was immediate and incredulous. "What are you talking about? How did you get into that building? What do you mean you have the sniper in custody?" Elena's reply was calm and professional, drawing on her military training in situation reporting. "The sniper was positioned exactly where I said, using the suppressed 308 rifle to target the command post. I've neutralized the threat and secured the weapon. But I'm monitoring their communications, and this appears to be part of a larger coordinated attack on a secondary target." The radio silence that followed Elena's report seemed to stretch for an eternity. She could imagine the confusion and disbelief among the tactical teams as they tried to process the information that a civilian paramedic had not only located the sniper they had been searching for, but had also uncovered evidence of a broader conspiracy. Detective Chen's voice came back over the radio with a mixture of urgency and skepticism. "Elena, I need you to stay exactly where you are and secure that location. We're sending a team to your position immediately. Do not take any further action until we arrive." Elena understood the detective's position, but she also knew that time was critical if there were other operatives preparing for additional attacks. The communication device was still active, and she could hear countdown sequences that suggested something was happening on a specific timeline. The law enforcement response needed to be redirected immediately, but convincing them to act on her intelligence would require more credibility than her current position provided. The sound of sirens and helicopter rotors indicated that the tactical response was beginning to shift toward the Morrison Building, but Elena knew that it would take time for them to reach her position and assess the situation. Meanwhile, whatever larger operation was in progress would continue to develop, potentially reaching a point where intervention would no longer be possible. Elena made the decision to continue monitoring the communication device while she waited for the tactical team to arrive. The conversation she was hearing were providing crucial intelligence about the broader operation, including references to specific locations and timing that could be essential for preventing additional attacks. As she listened to the ongoing communications, Elena began to piece together a picture of an operation that was far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. The sniper attack had been carefully planned as a diversion, designed to draw law enforcement resources away from the real target, while creating chaos and confusion that would delay effective response. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside indicated that the tactical team was approaching her position. Elena prepared to explain not only how she had located and neutralized the sniper, but also what she had learned about the broader conspiracy that was still unfolding. Her actions in the Morrison Building were about to be scrutinized by professionals who had no knowledge of her military background or the skills that had made her intervention possible. The door to the corner office opened carefully as the tactical team entered with weapons drawn and full protective gear. Elena was positioned so that she was clearly visible and obviously in control of the situation, but she knew that her presence would require extensive explanation. The neutralized sniper and the intelligence she had gathered were about to transform the entire law enforcement response to what everyone had thought was an isolated incident. The tactical team entered the corner office with practiced precision, their movements coordinated and professional as they assessed the scene before them. Elena remained motionless with her hands clearly visible, the neutralized sniper secured. On the floor beside the precision rifle that had been positioned to target the command post below, the team leader, a veteran sergeant named Michael Torres, surveyed the situation with experienced eyes that quickly took in every detail of the confrontation's aftermath. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the suspect and the weapon, Sergeant," Torres instructed, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to controlling dynamic situations. Elena complied immediately, moving to a position that gave the tactical team clear access to both the sniper and the equipment while maintaining her ability to communicate the critical intelligence she had gathered. Detective Chen arrived moments later, his expression a complex mixture of relief, confusion, and professional skepticism as he took in the scene. The paramedic who had insisted on her acoustic analysis of the sniper's location was now standing in an office with a neutralized suspect and a high-powered rifle that had clearly been positioned for a coordinated attack. The implications of what he was seeing challenged everything he thought he knew about civilian capabilities and the nature of the threat they had been facing. "How exactly did this happen?" Chen asked, his tone carefully controlled as he tried to process the reality of what Elena had accomplished. The question carried weight beyond simple curiosity, as her actions would need to be thoroughly investigated and documented to ensure they met legal and procedural standards. Elena's response was measured and professional, drawing on her military experience and after-action reporting. "I identified the sniper's location based on acoustic analysis of the weapon reports. When I reached this position, I found the suspect preparing for additional shots targeting your command post. The confrontation was necessary to prevent casualties among law enforcement personnel." The communication device that Elena had been monitoring continued to emit coded transmissions, and she directed the team's attention to the ongoing conversations. "There's more you need to hear. This wasn't an isolated attack. The sniper operation was designed as a diversion for something larger that's still in progress." Sergeant Torres examined the communication equipment while his team secured the suspect and the weapon. The quality and sophistication of the gear supported Elena's assessment that this was part of a coordinated operation involving multiple operatives. The coded transmissions were clearly part of a larger network that extended well beyond the single sniper they had captured. Detective Chen listened to the radio chatter for several minutes, his expression growing increasingly grim as he began to understand the implications of what Elena had uncovered. The references to timing, positioning, and secondary objectives painted a picture of an operation that was far more complex and dangerous than anyone had initially realized. "We need to get this intelligence to the command post immediately," Chen said, reaching for his radio to contact Captain Rodriguez. But Elena interrupted him with a gesture toward the communication device, where a new transmission was providing specific details about the primary target that had been concealed by the sniper diversion. The voice on the radio was calm and professional, coordinating what appeared to be final preparations for an attack on the Seattle Federal Courthouse, located several blocks from the current law enforcement response. The transmission included references to explosives, multiple entry points, and a timeline that suggested the operation was entering its final phase while police resources remained focused on the sniper incident. Elena's mind raced through the tactical implications of what they were hearing. The courthouse attack would likely involve hostages, given the timing and the references to civilian presence in the building. The sniper operation had been carefully planned to draw away the tactical teams and emergency response units that would normally be available to respond to such a crisis. The coordination and planning indicated a level of sophistication that went far beyond typical criminal activity. Sergeant Torres was already coordinating with his command structure, relaying the intelligence about the courthouse threat while maintaining security around the captured sniper and the evidence in the office. The tactical response was beginning to shift from search and containment to active intervention, but the time lost to the diversion operation had given the primary attackers a significant advantage. Detective Chen turned to Elena with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. "How did you know to look for a larger operation? Most people would have stopped after finding the sniper." Elena's response drew on her military intelligence training, though she was careful not to reveal the full extent of her background. The sophistication of the setup suggested professional planning. Professional operations usually have multiple components and backup plans. The sniper was too exposed and too easily located once you knew where to look. It felt like a sacrifice play. The accuracy of Elena's assessment was becoming clear as more intelligence emerged from the captured communications. The sniper had indeed been positioned as an expendable asset, designed to create maximum diversion while accepting the probability of capture or elimination. The real operatives were already in position at the courthouse, waiting for the optimal moment to begin their primary mission. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the radio with urgency that reflected the gravity of the situation they now faced. "All units, we have a credible threat to the federal courthouse. Suspected multiple hostiles with explosives. All available tactical teams redirect to that location immediately." The irony of the situation was not lost on Elena as she watched the law enforcement response mobilize around intelligence that she had provided. 3 hours earlier, these same professionals had dismissed her acoustic analysis as civilian speculation. Now they were redirecting their entire operation based on her assessment of enemy communications and tactical planning. Sergeant Torres approached Elena with a question that reflected the complexity of her position in the unfolding crisis. "Ma'am, I understand you have medical training. We're going to need all available emergency personnel at the courthouse if this develops the way we expect." Elena's military experience had taught her to assess not just immediate threats, but the broader tactical picture. If this was a coordinated attack, there could be other elements in play that she wasn't aware of. The sniper in the corner office might be just one part of a multi-phase operation, designed to create maximum chaos and casualties among law enforcement and civilian populations. The sound of movement from within the office indicated that the shooter was making final adjustments to the rifle's position. Elena knew that she was running out of time to act. Once the shooting resumed, the tactical teams would be dealing with casualties among their own leadership, creating a spiral of confusion that could lead to much larger losses. Elena made the decision to act based on her assessment of the immediate threat and her confidence in her ability to handle the situation. She had been trained for exactly this type of scenario, where individual initiative and skill could prevent larger tragedies. The 3 years of civilian life hadn't erased those capabilities. They had simply been dormant, waiting for a situation that required them. Moving with the silent precision that had once made her one of the most effective reconnaissance specialists in her unit, Elena positioned herself at the edge of the doorway. From this angle, she could see the entire office interior and assess the shooter's exact position and orientation. The tactical advantage was hers, but only for the few seconds before her presence was detected. The shooter was focused entirely on the target area below, making minute adjustments to the rifle's aim while monitoring the command post through the scope. Elena could see the professional concentration in the figure's posture, the kind of focused intensity that came from extensive training and experience. This was not an amateur or someone acting impulsively, but a skilled operative executing a planned mission. Elena's assessment of the tactical situation was complicated by the fact that she was operating without backup, communication, or official authority. Any action she took would be entirely on her own responsibility, with no support structure if things went wrong. But her training had also taught her that sometimes individual action was necessary when official channels were too slow or unavailable. The sound of radio chatter from the plaza below indicated that the tactical teams were still focused on the wrong locations, following up on the false leads that the initial shots had been designed to create. Elena could hear the frustration and urgency in the voices as they reported negative contacts and requested additional resources. Meanwhile, the real threat was seconds away from executing the next phase of the attack. Elena made her final preparations for action, drawing on years of training and experience that had prepared her for exactly this type of situation. Her body moved with automatic precision as she positioned herself for maximum tactical advantage while minimizing her exposure to counterattack. The civilian life she had built over the past 3 years seemed to fade away as Elena the soldier took complete control. The moment came when the shooter made a final adjustment to the rifle's position and began to settle into the firing stance. Elena could see the concentration and preparation that preceded a precision shot, and she knew that she had perhaps seconds before the shooting resumed. The weight of potential casualties in the plaza below added urgency to her decision-making process. Elena stepped into the doorway with movements that were both swift and silent, her training taking over completely as she assessed the immediate tactical situation. The shooter was positioned with their back partially toward the door, focused entirely on the target below and unaware of Elena's presence. The advantage of surprise was complete, but Elena knew it would last only seconds once her presence was detected. "Seattle Police, drop your weapon," Elena called out in a voice that carried the authority and control she had learned during her military service. The command was delivered with the kind of calm intensity that indicated readiness to active compliance. Was not immediate. The shooter's reaction was faster than Elena had hoped, but exactly what she had prepared for. Instead of dropping the rifle, the figure began to turn toward her while maintaining control of the weapon. Elena could see the tactical assessment happening in real time as the shooter evaluated this unexpected development and began to formulate a response. Elena's next actions were guided by years of training in close-quarters combat and threat neutralization. She moved with fluid precision, covering the distance between the doorway and the shooter's position before the rifle could be brought to bear on her. Her approach was designed to minimize the shooter's ability to use the weapon while maximizing her own tactical advantages. The confrontation that followed was brief but intense, a collision between two individuals with extensive combat training and experience. Elena's advantage lay in surprise and positioning, while the shooter's advantage was in familiarity with the environment and preparation. The outcome would depend on split-second decisions and the execution of techniques that both had trained for extensively. Elena's first priority was controlling the rifle, preventing it from being used either against her or against the targets below. Her approach was direct and decisive, using techniques that had been drilled into her during countless training scenarios. The shooter's response was equally professional, indicating military or specialized law enforcement background. The struggle for control of the weapon was complicated by the confined space of the office and the presence of furniture and equipment that could be used as obstacles or weapons. Elena had to adapt her tactics in real time, using her knowledge of the environment and her assessment of the shooter's capabilities to maintain her advantage. As the confrontation developed, Elena realized that her opponent was more skilled than she had initially assessed. The shooter's movements and reactions indicated extensive training in close-quarters combat, and the tactical awareness being displayed suggested someone with significant operational experience. This was not going to be the quick resolution that Elena had hoped for. The sound of the struggle began to create noise that could potentially alert others to the situation. Elena was aware that the confrontation needed to be resolved quickly, both to prevent the resumption of shooting and to avoid drawing attention that could complicate the situation further. Her tactical options were limited by the need to maintain control while minimizing collateral damage. Elena's military training had included extensive work in weapon retention and disarmament techniques, skills that she now employed with practiced efficiency. The shooter's resistance was professional and determined, but Elena's advantage in positioning and surprise was beginning to tell. The rifle, which had been the central focus of the struggle, began to move away from the window and the potential targets below. "Are you willing to assist with the response?" Elena nodded without hesitation, though she understood that accepting would place her in the middle of another dangerous situation. Her paramedic training and equipment would be valuable if there were casualties, but her military experience might be even more crucial if the tactical situation developed in unexpected ways. As the tactical team prepared to leave the Morrison Building, Elena found herself in the unusual position of transitioning from unauthorized civilian operative back to official emergency responder. The transformation required her to suppress the military mindset that had guided her actions in the office while reactivating the medical professional persona that was her official role in the response effort. Detective Chen accompanied Elena as they made their way toward the courthouse, his conversation revealing the beginning of a reassessment of her capabilities and background. "You know, your acoustic analysis was incredibly accurate. That's not something they teach in paramedic school. Where did you learn that kind of skill?" Elena's response was carefully measured, acknowledging her military service without revealing the classified nature of her specialization. "I served in the Army for several years. You pick up different skills depending on your assignment and training. Some of them transfer to civilian situations better than others." The understatement was deliberate, as Elena was aware that revealing her Special Forces background would create complications she wasn't prepared to deal with during an active crisis. Her focus needed to remain on the developing situation at the courthouse, where her medical skills would be needed and her tactical experience might once again prove valuable. As they approached the courthouse area, Elena could see the beginnings of what was clearly going to be a complex tactical situation. The building was a large federal facility that housed multiple courts, administrative offices, and detention facilities. The presence of civilians, including court personnel, attorneys, and defendants, created a hostage scenario that would require careful coordination to resolve safely. The command post that had been established near the courthouse was a stark contrast to the confused response that had characterized the early stages of the sniper incident. Intelligence from the captured communications had provided law enforcement with specific information about the threat, allowing for more focused and effective planning. Elena reported to the medical staging area, where other paramedics and emergency medical personnel were preparing for potential casualties. Her supervisor, Janet Morrison, was surprised to see her arriving from the direction of the tactical response rather than from the normal emergency dispatch routes. "Elena, where have you been? We've been trying to reach you on radio for the past hour," Morrison said, her concern evident as she handed Elena a full medical kit and prepared her for deployment. Elena's explanation was necessarily brief and incomplete, focusing on her medical response duties while omitting the details of her tactical involvement. "I was responding to casualties from the sniper incident. Got caught up in the investigation when additional intelligence emerged about this location." The partial truth satisfied Morrison's immediate questions while allowing Elena to focus on preparing for what was likely to be a challenging medical response scenario. The intelligence from the courthouse indicated that the attackers were prepared for a prolonged siege, which could result in significant casualties among both hostages and law enforcement personnel. As Elena organized her medical equipment, she continued to monitor the tactical communications that were coordinating the law enforcement response. Her military experience allowed her to understand the planning and deployment discussions in ways that were not apparent to the civilian medical personnel around her. The tactical picture that emerged from the radio chatter was complex and dangerous. The attackers had gained access to the courthouse through multiple entry points, suggesting either inside knowledge or extensive reconnaissance. They had taken control of at least 2 floors of the building and were believed to be holding civilian hostages in addition to court personnel. Elena's assessment of the situation was informed by her intelligence training and her understanding of similar operations she had encountered during her military service. The level of coordination and planning suggested either domestic terrorism with sophisticated backing or foreign operatives with specific political objectives. Either scenario presented challenges that went beyond typical law enforcement capabilities. The sound of controlled explosions from the direction of the courthouse indicated that the tactical teams were beginning their entry operations. Elena knew from her military experience that breaching operations in hostage situations required precise timing and coordination to minimize casualties among both hostages and responding personnel. Janet Morrison approached Elena with a briefing about their expected role in the medical response. "We're expecting multiple casualties, both civilian and law enforcement. The tactical teams are going to need immediate medical support and will likely have hostages requiring trauma care. Are you ready for this level of intensity?" Elena's response was calm and confident, drawing on both her medical training and her military experience with casualty situations. "I'm ready. Do we have any intelligence about the number of hostages or the types of injuries we might be dealing with?" The question revealed Elena's tactical mindset, her natural inclination to gather intelligence that would improve her effectiveness in the medical response. Morrison noted the professional approach but attributed it to Elena's reputation for thorough preparation rather than recognizing its military origins. As the medical team prepared to move closer to the courthouse for immediate casualty response, Elena found herself once again in a position where her dual background created unique capabilities. Her medical training would be essential for treating wounded personnel, but her military experience might prove equally valuable if the tactical situation developed in unexpected ways. The sound of gunfire from inside the courthouse confirmed that the tactical teams had made contact with the attackers. Elena's medical training focused her attention on preparing for trauma casualties, while her military experience automatically assessed the tactical implications of the engagement pattern she was hearing. Detective Chen appeared at the medical staging area with a request that surprised both Elena and her supervisor. "Elena, the tactical commander wants to consult with you about the courthouse layout." Your analysis of the sniper situation was accurate enough that they want your input on potential escape routes and defensive positions. The request placed Elena in an uncomfortable position, as providing tactical consultation would require her to reveal more about her military background than she had intended. But the ongoing hostage situation made her personal preferences secondary to the potential for saving lives through effective tactical planning. Elena followed Detective Chen to the tactical command post, where she found herself surrounded by law enforcement professionals who were dealing with a situation that challenged their training and experience. The complexity of the courthouse assault was testing the limits of local tactical capabilities, creating an environment where any additional expertise could prove valuable. Captain Rodriguez looked up from tactical maps and building blueprints as Elena approached, his expression reflecting the stress of commanding a response to an unprecedented threat. "Ms. Vasquez, Detective Chen tells me you have some insights about coordinated operations that might help us understand what we're dealing with here." Elena's response was careful and professional, acknowledging her military experience while focusing on the specific tactical questions that could improve the law enforcement response. The coordination between the sniper diversion and the courthouse assault suggests extensive planning and reconnaissance. The attackers likely have detailed knowledge of the building layout and standard response procedures. The assessment was based on Elena's intelligence training and her analysis of the operation's sophistication, but she presented it in terms that focused on tactical implications rather than revealing the classified nature of her background. The tactical commander and his team needed actionable intelligence, not detailed explanations of how she had acquired her expertise. As Elena studied the building blueprints and tactical deployment plans, her military experience began to identify potential vulnerabilities and opportunities that might not be apparent to law enforcement personnel. The courthouse's design and the attacker's positioning suggested specific objectives that went beyond simple hostage-taking or terrorism. The ongoing gunfire from inside the building indicated that the tactical teams were facing organized resistance from well-equipped and trained opponents. Elena's assessment of the engagement patterns suggested that the attackers were employing military-style defensive tactics, further confirming her evaluation of the operation's sophistication. Captain Rodriguez asked Elena to remain available for additional consultation as the situation developed, recognizing that her insights had already proven valuable in understanding the nature of the threat they were facing. The request placed Elena in an official advisory role that acknowledged her expertise while maintaining her civilian status. As Elena returned to the medical staging area, she reflected on the unexpected turn her day had taken. She had begun her shift as a paramedic responding to shooting victims and was now serving as an unofficial tactical consultant while preparing to treat casualties from a complex hostage rescue operation. The transformation highlighted the ways in which her military background continued to influence her civilian life, even when she tried to keep those aspects of her identity separate. The crescendo of gunfire from within the courthouse suddenly ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that made every emergency responder tense with anticipation. Elena stood among the medical team, her hands steady as she prepared trauma kits, but her mind was analyzing the acoustic signature of what had just transpired. The abrupt end to the engagement suggested either a tactical breakthrough or a strategic withdrawal by the attackers. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio with cautious optimism. "Alpha Team reports they've secured the second floor. Multiple suspects down, but we have evidence of additional operatives who may have moved to higher floors. Continuing sweep operations." Elena's medical training kicked into high gear as the first casualties began emerging from the courthouse. 2 tactical officers with gunshot wounds were rushed to her position, their injuries serious but manageable with immediate intervention. She worked with practiced efficiency, her hands moving automatically through triage procedures while her Mind continued to process the tactical implications of what she was seeing. The wounded officers' accounts of the engagement painted a picture of opponents who were well-trained and heavily armed, but who had also demonstrated unusual tactical restraint, rather than fighting to the death as might be expected from terrorists or extremists. They had conducted what appeared to be a measured withdrawal when confronted with superior force. The behavior suggested professionals executing a planned operation rather than ideologically motivated attackers. Detective Chen approached Elena's treatment area with news that confirmed her growing suspicions about the true nature of the courthouse assault. "Elena, we need you to look at something." The tactical team found communications equipment similar to what you discovered at the Morrison Building, but the transmissions are in a language none of our translators recognize immediately. Elena paused in her medical work, her military intelligence background suddenly relevant in a way that she hadn't anticipated. During her service with the Rangers, she had been exposed to various foreign languages and communication protocols as part of her reconnaissance training. The request to analyze unknown communications was bringing her full military expertise into play in a civilian law enforcement context. Following Chen to the tactical command post, Elena found herself looking at communication intercepts that immediately triggered recognition from her military experience. The language was a mixture of coded phrases and foreign terminology that she recognized from intelligence briefings about international criminal organizations with military connections. "This isn't standard terrorist communication," Elena told Captain Rodriguez, her voice carrying new authority as she drew on specialized knowledge that went beyond her medical training. "The terminology and structure suggest organized crime with international connections, possibly with military or intelligence backgrounds. This operation has characteristics of a professional intelligence operation rather than domestic terrorism." The assessment transformed the law enforcement understanding of what they were dealing with. Instead of local extremists or mentally unstable individuals, they were confronting what appeared to be foreign operatives conducting a sophisticated intelligence operation on American soil. The implications were staggering and would require federal involvement at the highest levels. Elena's analysis of the communications revealed references to document recovery and data extraction, suggesting that the courthouse assault had been designed to acquire specific information rather than simply cause casualties or create terror. The hostage situation appeared to have been secondary to an intelligence gathering mission that had used the chaos of the sniper diversion to gain access to federal facilities. Captain Rodriguez immediately contacted federal authorities while Elena continued to analyze the intercepted communications. Her military intelligence training allowed her to identify patterns and references that were opaque to local law enforcement, providing crucial insights into the scope and objectives of the operation they had disrupted. As Elena worked through the communication intercepts, she began to piece together a picture of an operation that had targeted specific federal cases or investigations housed within the courthouse. The precision of the intelligence suggested either inside knowledge or extensive surveillance of federal law enforcement activities. The implications for national security were profound. The medical response continued around Elena as more casualties emerged from the courthouse, but her role had evolved beyond simple trauma care. She found herself serving as an unofficial intelligence analyst, her military background providing capabilities that were unavailable through normal law enforcement channels. The transformation from paramedic to tactical consultant to intelligence analyst reflected the complex nature of the threat they had encountered. Federal agents began arriving on scene as the scope of the operation became clear. Agent Sarah Kim from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division took charge of the intelligence aspects of the investigation, immediately recognizing the value of Elena's analysis in understanding the enemy's capabilities and objectives. "Ms. Vasquez, your assessment of the communications has been invaluable," Agent Kim said as she reviewed Elena's preliminary analysis. "We're going to need a comprehensive The brief about everything you observed, from the initial sniper incident through the courthouse assault. Your insights could be crucial for understanding how this operation was planned and executed. Elena nodded, understanding that her involvement in the day's events had moved far beyond her civilian role as a paramedic. The federal investigation would require her to provide detailed testimony about her actions and observations, potentially revealing aspects of her military background that she had kept private for 3 years. The tactical teams completed their sweep of the courthouse, reporting that they had eliminated or captured most of the attackers, but that several operatives appeared to have escaped during the initial phases of the assault. The partial success meant that while the immediate threat had been neutralized, the broader conspiracy remained active with unknown operatives still at large. Elena's analysis of the escape patterns, based on her review of the building layout and the tactical engagement reports, suggested that the escaped operatives had used predetermined routes that indicated detailed advance reconnaissance. The level of planning and execution continued to point toward professional intelligence operatives rather than typical criminal organizations. As the immediate crisis wound down, Elena found herself reflecting on the day's extraordinary events. She had begun her shift as a paramedic responding to what appeared to be a simple shooting incident, and had ended up serving as a tactical consultant and intelligence analyst in a complex counterintelligence operation. The transformation highlighted the ways in which her military background continued to shape her capabilities and responses, even in civilian contexts. Detective Chen approached Elena as she finished treating the last of the wounded officers, his expression reflecting the new understanding of her capabilities and background. "Elena, I owe you an apology. When you first told us about the acoustic analysis, I thought you were just another civilian trying to be helpful. I had no idea you had the expertise to back up your observations." Elena's response was gracious but modest, acknowledging the detective's honesty while maintaining the low profile she preferred. "I understand your skepticism. Most people don't expect paramedics to have tactical or intelligence training. I've tried to keep those aspects of my background separate from my civilian career." The conversation highlighted the complexity of Elena's position as someone trying to build a peaceful civilian life, while possessing skills that were occasionally essential for protecting that same civilian community. The day's events had demonstrated that sometimes those skills could not remain dormant when lives were at stake. Agent Kim returned with news that would further complicate Elena's desire for anonymity. "Elena, the preliminary investigation suggests that your intervention at the Morrison Building prevented what could have been a much larger intelligence operation. The federal government is going to want to recognize your actions, both publicly and through official channels." The prospect of public recognition was troubling for Elena, who valued the quiet life she had built with her sister, Maria. Public attention would inevitably lead to scrutiny of her military background and potentially compromise the peaceful existence she had worked to create. But she also understood that the investigation required full cooperation to prevent future operations. As the emergency response began to wind down, Elena made her way back to the medical staging area where her supervisor, Janet Morrison, was coordinating the final phases of the casualty treatment. Morrison's expression reflected curiosity about Elena's extended absence and her apparent involvement in the tactical aspects of the response. "Elena, I've been hearing some interesting reports about your role in today's events," Morrison said, her tone mixing professional interest with personal concern. "Are you okay? This has been well beyond a normal emergency response call." Elena assured her supervisor that she was uninjured and professionally capable of continuing her duties, but she understood that her actions during the crisis would require explanation and potentially formal review. Her involvement in tactical operations while on duty as a paramedic created administrative complications that would need to be addressed. The drive home that evening gave Elena time to process the day's events and their implications for her future. She had successfully prevented a major intelligence operation through actions that drew on her military training. But in doing so, she had also compromised the anonymity that had allowed her to build a normal civilian life. The balance she had maintained for 3 years between her past and present had been fundamentally altered. Maria was waiting when Elena arrived at their apartment, her 14-year-old face reflecting the worry and confusion that came from seeing news reports about her sister's involvement in a major law enforcement operation. The conversation that followed would require Elena to explain aspects of her military background that she had kept vague, while reassuring Maria that their quiet life together remained her priority. "Elena, the news said you caught a sniper and helped stop some kind of attack," Maria said, her voice mixing pride with concern. "They're calling you a hero, but they're also asking questions about how you knew what to do. Are people going to be asking us lots of questions now?" Elena's response was honest but reassuring, acknowledging that their lives might face some disruption while emphasizing her commitment to maintaining the stability that Maria needed. The recognition for her actions was gratifying, but Elena's primary concern remained her responsibility as Maria's guardian and provider. The following days brought a flood of media attention and official recognition that Elena had feared. News outlets picked up the story of the paramedic who had used military training to prevent a terrorist attack, creating public interest that extended far beyond Seattle. Elena found herself thrust into a spotlight that she had deliberately avoided. For 3 years, federal investigators continued to debrief Elena about her observations and analysis, revealing that the operation she had disrupted was part of a larger international intelligence effort targeting American law enforcement and judicial activities. Her intervention had not only prevented immediate casualties, but had also provided crucial intelligence about foreign operations on American soil. The recognition for Elena's actions came from multiple sources, including commendations from local law enforcement, federal agencies, and military organizations that acknowledged her continued service to national security as a civilian. While Elena appreciated the recognition, she was more concerned with the impact on her quiet life with Maria and her career as a paramedic. Elena's story became a symbol of the hidden capabilities that existed within civilian communities, highlighting the ways in which military veterans continued to serve their country even after formal service ended. Her acoustic analysis and tactical intervention demonstrated that expertise gained in military service could prove invaluable in protecting civilian populations from sophisticated threats. The transformation of Elena's life from anonymous paramedic to recognized hero was complete, but she remained focused on the values that had guided her transition to civilian life. Her actions during the crisis had been motivated not by a desire for recognition, but by a commitment to protecting innocent people using whatever skills were necessary. That commitment, rather than any desire for public attention, continued to define her approach to both her professional responsibilities and her personal life. As Seattle returned to normal in the weeks following the incident, Elena found that her role within the emergency response community had fundamentally changed. Her colleagues now understood that her calm competence under pressure was backed by training and experience that went far beyond standard paramedic preparation. The revelation enhanced her professional relationships while also creating expectations that she would continue to serve in advisory roles when complex situations arose. Elena's story had proven that sometimes the most important heroes are hidden in plain sight, using their skills quietly and effectively when circumstances demand action. Her acoustic analysis had led to tactical success, her military training had prevented casualties, and her intelligence background had revealed the true scope of a foreign operation. The quiet paramedic had emerged as a guardian whose capabilities were only revealed when her community needed them most. 6 months after the courthouse incident, Elena stood before a packed auditorium at the Seattle Emergency Services Training Center, her crisp dress uniform reflecting the afternoon sunlight. streaming through tall windows. The Medal of Valor ceremony had drawn emergency responders from across the Pacific Northwest, federal officials from Washington, D.C., and media representatives whose cameras captured every moment of what had become a symbol of civilian heroism. In the face of international terrorism, Elena's transformation from anonymous paramedic to nationally recognized hero had been gradual but profound. The woman who had once hidden her military background now served as a bridge between veteran communities and emergency services, her story inspiring others who carried hidden strengths from their service years. The podium where she stood represented not just personal recognition, but acknowledgement of the countless veterans who continued serving their communities in civilian roles. Commissioner Patricia Valdez of the Seattle Emergency Management Department stepped forward to present the award, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. Elena Vasquez represents the finest tradition of service that transcends uniform and continues long after formal military duty ends. Her actions on October 15th prevented what intelligence agencies have confirmed would have been a devastating blow to federal law enforcement capabilities. The audience rose in sustained applause as Elena accepted the medal, but her thoughts were focused on the empty seat in the third row where her father would have sat. James Miller's teachings about precision, patience, and protecting others had guided her through the crisis, and his memory continued to influence her approach too. Both her professional responsibilities and her growing role as a mentor to other veterans. Elena's acceptance speech was brief and focused on the broader community of first responders who had worked together during the crisis. She spoke about the importance of recognizing that heroism often emerged from unexpected sources and that the skills developed in military service could find new purpose in civilian careers dedicated to protecting and serving others. The recognition ceremony marked the culmination of a period that had fundamentally changed Elena's life while reinforcing her core values. The media attention and federal commendations had created opportunities she had never imagined, but Elena remained grounded in her commitment to emergency medical service and her responsibility to Maria, who watched from the audience with obvious pride. Detective Chen, now a close friend and professional colleague, had been instrumental in ensuring that Elena's story was told accurately and that her contributions were properly recognized. His initial skepticism had evolved into deep respect for her capabilities and judgment, leading to a consulting relationship that utilized Elena's unique combination of medical, tactical, and intelligence skills. Federal agent Sarah Kim approached Elena after the ceremony with news that would once again test her balance between public recognition and private life. "Elena, the Department of Homeland Security has been following your story and your subsequent work with local emergency services. We have a proposition that might interest you." The proposition involved a newly created position that would allow Elena to maintain her role as a paramedic while serving as a liaison between federal agencies and local emergency services. The position would utilize her unique background to help identify and respond to threats that cross traditional jurisdictional boundaries, while keeping her rooted in the community she had chosen to serve. Elena's consideration of the federal position reflected the ongoing tension between her desire for a quiet life and her recognition that her skills could serve a larger purpose. The role would provide official channels for the consulting work she was already doing informally, while offering resources and support that could enhance her effectiveness in protecting civilian communities. Maria's perspective on the federal offer was surprisingly mature for her 15 years, reflecting the growth and understanding that had come from witnessing her sister's emergence as a public figure. "Elena, I think you should take it if it means you can help more people. But I also think you should make sure they understand that family comes first." The wisdom in Maria's response reinforced Elena's belief that her sister had developed resilience and judgment that would serve her well regardless of what decisions Elena made about her professional future. The strong relationship they had built provided a foundation that could weather the challenges of public attention and professional obligations. Elena's decision to accept the federal liaison position came with conditions that reflected her priorities and values. She would maintain her certification and active duty as a paramedic, continue living in Seattle with Maria, and retain the authority to decline assignments that conflicted with her family responsibilities or her commitment to local emergency services. The new role began with Elena developing training programs that helped emergency responders recognize and respond to threats that combined traditional criminal activity with international terrorism or espionage. Her experience with the courthouse incident provided a framework for understanding how sophisticated adversaries could exploit gaps between different response agencies and jurisdictional authorities. Elena's first major assignment involved investigating a series of seemingly unrelated incidents along the West Coast that federal analysts suspected might be connected to foreign intelligence gathering. The assignment required her to travel to different cities, working with local emergency services to analyze patterns that might not be apparent to individual departments. In Portland, Elena worked with fire department investigators who had responded to a series of small blazes in buildings that housed federal contractor offices. The fires had been contained quickly and caused minimal damage, but Elena's analysis revealed that they had provided cover for sophisticated surveillance equipment installation that went undetected for weeks. The Los Angeles assignment involved reviewing emergency medical responses to incidents near defense contractor facilities. Elena's medical background allowed her to identify patterns in the nature and timing of injuries that suggested deliberate creation of medical emergencies to gain access to restricted areas during security responses. In San Francisco, Elena collaborated with harbor patrol units investigating a pattern of small boat emergencies near naval facilities. Her analysis of the acoustic signatures reported by emergency responders revealed that some of the distress calls had been generated by equipment designed to mimic marine engine failures while providing cover for intelligence collection activities. The pattern that emerged from Elena's multi-city investigation painted a picture of a coordinated intelligence operation that had been using emergency services as unwitting cover for surveillance and infiltration activities. The sophistication and scope of the operation rivaled anything she had encountered during her military service, demonstrating that foreign intelligence activities on American soil had evolved to exploit civilian infrastructure. Elena's final report to federal authorities detailed how adversaries had weaponized the trust and access that emergency responders enjoyed in American communities. The revelation led to significant changes in training and protocols designed to help first responders identify when their good intentions were being exploited by hostile actors. The success of Elena's investigation work led to additional assignments that took her across the country, but she maintained her commitment to spending at least half her time in Seattle, providing direct emergency medical services. The balance allowed her to stay connected to the frontline work that had originally drawn her to emergency medicine while utilizing her specialized skills for national security purposes. Elena's growing reputation in federal law enforcement circles brought opportunities to testify before congressional committees about the intersection of emergency services and national security. Her testimony emphasized the importance of supporting local first responders while providing them with training and resources to recognize sophisticated threats. The congressional testimony marked Elena's emergence as a national voice on issues related to veteran integration into civilian emergency services and the security implications of emergency response protocols. Her story had evolved from personal heroism to policy advocacy, creating platforms for addressing systemic issues that affected both national security and emergency response effectiveness. Elena's relationship with Detective Chen had evolved into a professional partnership that combined their complementary skills in law enforcement and emergency medicine. They co-developed training programs that helped police and medical personnel work more effectively during complex incidents that involved multiple types of threats. The training programs became models for other cities dealing with the evolving threat environment that Elena's work had helped identify. The curriculum emphasized the importance of cross-training between different emergency response disciplines and the value of incorporating military veteran perspectives into civilian emergency planning. Elena's story had inspired other veterans to pursue careers in emergency services, creating a network of professionals who brought military experience to civilian protective roles. The network provided mentorship and support for veterans, making the transition while also enhancing the overall capabilities of emergency response systems. Maria's graduation from high school coincided with Elena's 3rd anniversary in the federal liaison role, marking a milestone that represented successful balance between professional recognition and family responsibility. Elena's ability to maintain stability in Maria's life while serving an increasingly prominent public role had validated her approach to managing competing obligations. The graduation ceremony was attended by many of the colleagues and friends Elena had made during her years of service, creating a gathering that celebrated not just Maria's achievement, but also the community that had supported both sisters through their journey. Detective Chen, Agent Kim, Commissioner Valdez, and dozens of emergency responders joined in recognizing Maria's academic success and Elena's role as both guardian and mentor. Elena's reflection on the 3 years since the courthouse incident revealed a life that had been fundamentally transformed while remaining true to its core values. The recognition and opportunities had been gratifying, but Elena's greatest satisfaction came from knowing that her work had prevented other families from experiencing the trauma and loss that could result from sophisticated attacks on civilian targets. The acoustic analysis that had started Elena's journey from anonymous paramedic to national security asset had become a symbol of the hidden strengths that existed within American communities. Her story demonstrated that military training could find new purpose in civilian service, and that heroism often emerged from unexpected sources when circumstances demanded extraordinary action. Elena's current role had evolved to include developing policies and procedures that would help emergency services adapt to emerging threats while maintaining their primary mission of saving lives and protecting communities. The work required balancing security concerns with the openness and trust that made emergency services effective in civilian contexts. The international implications of Elena's investigations had led to coordination with allied nations facing similar challenges from hostile intelligence activities. Her expertise in recognizing how emergency services could be exploited had proven valuable for countries dealing with sophisticated adversaries who use civilian infrastructure for intelligence gathering. Elena's story had been featured in training materials used by military, law enforcement, and emergency service organizations around the world. The case study emphasized the importance of acoustic analysis, pattern recognition, and the value of integrating veteran experience into civilian emergency response capabilities. The personal cost of Elena's public role had been manageable because of the strong foundation she had built with Maria and the support network they had developed in Seattle. Elena's commitment to maintaining local ties and family priorities had provided stability that allowed her to handle the demands of national security work without losing sight of what mattered most. Elena's future remained focused on the intersection of emergency services and national security, but with Maria preparing for college, new possibilities were emerging for expanding her role, while maintaining the balance that had sustained her through years of public service. The foundation of skills, relationships, and values that had guided her journey continued to provide direction for whatever challenges lay ahead. As Elena looked back on the transformation from the courthouse steps where she had first been recognized as a hero, she understood that her story was part of a larger narrative about the ways military service could continue to serve national interests in civilian contexts. The acoustic analysis that had identified a sniper's location had led to a career dedicated to protecting communities from threats they might never see coming. The evening after Maria's graduation, Elena sat on their apartment balcony overlooking Seattle's skyline, listening to the urban symphony that had become as familiar as the sounds of combat she had once known. The city's acoustic signature told stories of safety and prosperity, of communities that functioned because people like Elena were willing to use whatever skills they possessed to protect what others built and cherished. Elena's journey from hidden veteran to recognized hero to national security asset had proven that the most important service often happened when people were willing to step forward from comfortable anonymity to meet challenges that demanded everything they had learned and become. The sound that had started it all, the acoustic signature of sniper fire, had led to a life of service that honored both her military training and her civilian values. The Medal of Valor on Elena's dresser reflected light from the setting sun, a reminder of recognition that had changed her life while affirming values that remained constant. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but Elena faced them with the confidence that came from knowing she had found a way to serve her community while remaining true to the person she had chosen to become. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.